Husband's funeral, I noticed something no one else seemed to catch. His wedding ring was gone, the ring he had never taken off in 42 years. My daughter arrived late with her husband. She broke down in tears, loud and dramatic, but something about it felt off. Then my son-in-law stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming, and whispered, "Don't worry. I'll manage that $22 million company better than he ever did." That was the moment doubt took root. Later that night, I found a letter my husband had hidden inside his Bible, and what it said nearly destroyed me. I'm really grateful that you're here. Before the story continues, please share in the comments where you're watching from. It helps build this space and reminds us we're not alone in these experiences. And one important note, this story contains a few fictional elements added for clarity and learning. While names and situations may be adjusted, the message itself is sincere, meaningful, and intended to help. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn on May 15, 2024. It drummed against the roof of Alexander Funeral Home, a steady rhythm that matched the ache in my chest. I sat in the front row staring at the mahogany casket where my husband of 42 years lay in his Sunday best. Charles Robert Bennett, gone at 67. The room smelled of lilies and old wood. Gospel hymns played softly. Around me, neighbors from Greater Faith Baptist Church whispered their sympathy. Diane Robertson, my best friend since nursing school, sat beside me with a steady hand on my shoulder. I couldn't take my eyes off Charles. His face was pale, his hands folded across his chest. That's when I noticed it. His wedding ring was gone. For 42 years, Charles never took off that gold band. Not when he worked on the car, not when he closed deals at Bennett and Associates, not even when the doctor said it might help with swelling last winter. "This ring stays on until the day I see Jesus," he used to say. But now his left hand lay bare. Before I could process it, the chapel door creaked open. Rebecca, my daughter, stepped inside, late disheveled, her face streaked with tears. She was 38, but she looked like a stranger. Her designer dress was wrinkled. Her heels clicked too loudly as she hurried down the aisle and collapsed beside me, sobbing into her hands. I reached for her instinctively, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way her crying felt performed. Maybe it was that she hadn't called once in the 3 days since Charles passed. Or maybe it was her husband, Trevor Caldwell, slipping in behind her with barely a glance at the casket. Reverend Samuel Brooks began the service, his voice warm as honey. He spoke about Charles's integrity, his faith, his legacy in Charlotte's business community. I tried to listen, but my mind circled back to that missing ring. The service ended at 3:30. Guests filed past offering condolences. There were so many employees from Bennett and Associates, clients Charles had worked with for decades, church members. Diane stayed close, whispering names when my mind went blank. Then came Trevor. He stood beside me as the last mourners left. Rebecca had gone to the restroom. For a moment, it was just us. He leaned in close, too close, his cologne sharp and invasive. "Don't worry, Catherine. I'll make better use of that $22 million than Charles ever did." I froze. He smiled, thin, cold, and straightened his tie before walking away. $22 million. The value of Bennett and Associates, the company Charles built over 30 years. The company Trevor joined 5 years ago when he married Rebecca. I stood there numb, watching him disappear through the double doors. By evening, Diane drove me home. My house on Providence Road felt too big, too quiet. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Charles's bare hand. I heard Trevor's voice. "I'll make better use of that $22 million. At 2 a.m, I sat at my kitchen table with cold tea, staring at the dark window. My reflection stared back, a 65-year-old woman who'd spent 38 years as an accountant, who knew numbers, who knew when things didn't add up. And nothing about Charles's passing added up. Trevor had threatened me at my husband's funeral. Rebecca had sobbed like she was performing. And Charles's wedding ring, his most sacred possession, was gone. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I was going to find out. 2 nights without sleep. That's all it took for my body to give up pretending. On the morning of May 17th, I sat at my kitchen table as pale sunlight crept through the blinds. The house was too quiet. Charles's coffee mug still sat by the sink. His reading glasses rested on the counter. I needed peace, Or at least I needed to try. I walked to the living room and opened the glass cabinet where Mama's Bible had sat for 30 years, a worn King James version, the leather cover soft from her hands. She'd passed it to me before she died, whispering, "When you don't know what to do, baby, let the Lord speak." I carried it back to the table and let it fall open. Psalm 23. That's when I saw it. A white envelope tucked between the pages. My name, Catherine, written across the front in Charles's handwriting. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded once. Charles's personal letterhead. The date at the top read May 11th, 2024, 4 days before he passed. My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wanted more time with you, but if something happens before I go to the authorities, you need to know the truth. Trevor has been stealing from Bennett and Associates. Over 18 months, he's moved nearly $5 million through a shell company, TDT Holdings. I confronted him on May 9th. He denied everything, but I saw it in his eyes. Catherine, Rebecca is involved. Trevor has been paying her over $600,000 in 15 months. I don't want to believe our daughter would do this, but the numbers don't lie. I've given all the evidence to Philip Whitmore, bank statements, transfer records, everything. If anything happens to me, go to him. He'll know what to do. I was supposed to meet with the police on May 18th. If I don't make it, promise me you'll finish what I started. I love you, Catherine. I always have. Charles. The paper slipped from my hands. Trevor has been stealing. Rebecca is involved. Over $600,000. I read it again. Each time the truth hit harder. My husband hadn't passed from a stroke. Something had happened to him, something deliberate. And my daughter had taken money from the man responsible. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and scrolled to Philip Whitmore, Charles's attorney for over 20 years, a man I'd met at company events but never thought I'd need. The phone rang twice. Catherine. His voice was gentle. How are you holding up? Philip. My voice cracked. I studied it. I need to see you tomorrow morning as soon as possible. A pause. Of course. Is everything all right? No. Everything is not all right. Can you meet me at 10 tomorrow morning? I'll be there. My office in South Park. I'll clear my schedule. Thank you. I ended the call and set the phone down. My hands were still shaking. I looked at Charles's letter again. The careful loops, the steady lines. He'd known. He'd known something was coming. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside Mama's Bible. Trevor Caldwell had taken my husband from me. My daughter had betrayed everything we'd built, but they'd made one mistake. They'd left me alive, and I was going to make sure justice was served no matter what it cost. The drive to South Park on the morning of May 18th felt longer than it was. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my mind replaying Charles's letter over and over. Trevor has been stealing. Rebecca is involved. Philip Whitmore's office sat on the 9th floor of a glass building near Fairview Road. I'd been here once before, years ago, when Charles updated his will. The waiting room was calm leather chairs, soft lighting, framed law degrees on the walls. A receptionist greeted me with a sympathetic smile and led me down a quiet hallway. Philip stood when I entered. He was in his early 50s, silver-haired, with the steady presence of someone who'd spent decades handling other people's crises. He gestured to a chair across from his mahogany desk. Catherine, he said gently, thank you for coming. I know this must be incredibly difficult. I sat down, my purse clutched in my lap. Charles left me a letter. He said you have evidence. Philip nodded slowly. He opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. Charles brought this to me on May 4th. He asked me to hold it and only give it to you if something happened to him. He paused. He didn't say what he thought might happen, but he was very clear about the instructions. He slid the envelope across the desk. My name was written on the front in Charles's handwriting, the same careful script from the letter in Mama's Bible. I broke the seal and pulled out the contents: bank statements, spreadsheets, printed emails, a USB drive, and a business card. Philip leaned forward. Charles spent 2 months building that file. He hired a private investigator, Vincent Russo, to help track the money trail. What you're looking at is proof that Trevor has been moving funds illegally from Bennett and Associates. I stared at the first spreadsheet. At the top in bold letters, TDT Holdings LLC, unauthorized transfers. Row after row of transactions. Dates, amounts, fake vendor names, payments routed through offshore accounts. The numbers climbed higher and higher. $4.8 million, Philip said quietly. That's how much Trevor has taken over the past 18 months. My chest tightened. 4.8 million. From the company Charles built. The company he poured 30 years of his life into. There's more. Philip said, his voice careful now. He pulled out a bank statement clipped to a yellow sticky note. Charles's handwriting again, Rebecca's account. I looked at the page. It was a Wells Fargo statement under Rebecca's name. Deposits from TDT Holdings, monthly, starting 15 months ago. January 2023, $38,000. February 2023, $42,000. March 2023, $40,000. On and on, month after month. At the bottom, Charles had written in red ink, total received $620,000. My hands started to shake. Your daughter has been receiving payments from Trevor's shell company, Philip said softly. Charles didn't know why. He didn't know if she understood where the money was coming from. But the trail is clear. I couldn't breathe. $620,000. My daughter, my Rebecca. Philip reached across the desk and placed a business card in front of me. Vincent Russo, private investigator. A phone number. An address in Uptown Charlotte. Charles hired him in January, Philip explained. Vincent's been tracking Trevor for months. If you want to understand what's really happening, he's the person to call. I picked up the card with numb fingers. Vincent Russo. A stranger who knew more about my family than I did. I looked back at the spreadsheets, the bank statements, the emails. Everything was there. Cold. Factual. Undeniable. Trevor had been stealing from us for a year and a half. And Rebecca, my daughter, the little girl I'd raised, the woman I thought I knew, had taken over $600,000 from him. I stood slowly gathering the papers and the USB drive. My voice felt distant when I finally spoke. Thank you, Philip. He walked me to the door. Catherine, if you need anything legal advice, someone to talk to, I'm here. I nodded, but I wasn't really listening anymore. My mind was already somewhere else. My daughter, she took money from the man who was stealing from us, and Charles had found out. By the time I got home, it was past 1 in the afternoon. The house felt different now, like it was holding secrets I hadn't noticed before. I set my purse on the counter and sat down at Charles's laptop. But I didn't open the USB drive yet. My mind was stuck on something Charles had written. If something happens to me. I opened a browser and typed warfare and poisoning symptoms. The results loaded instantly. Mayo Clinic, WebMD. I clicked the first link. Warfarin is a blood thinner. Overdose can cause internal bleeding. Symptoms include severe headaches, nosebleeds, unusual bruising, extreme fatigue. In intentional overdose cases, symptoms may mimic a stroke or natural cardiac event. My chest tightened. Charles had complained of headaches for weeks. I'd found him with a nosebleed in early May that wouldn't stop. He'd brushed it off stress, he said. And the fatigue. Some days he could barely stay awake through dinner. I thought it was age, work stress. But what if it wasn't? I grabbed Vincent Russo's card and dialed. My hands were shaking. He answered on the second ring. Vincent Russo. Mr. Russo, this is Catherine Bennett, Charles's wife. A pause. Mrs. Bennett, I'm so sorry for your loss. Charles was a good man. I need to see you today. There's a coffee shop in South End Common Market. 4 o'clock. I'll be there. Common Market was busy when I arrived. Young professionals on laptops, couples talking over drinks. Vincent sat at a corner table in a dark jacket. Late 40s, sharp eyes, the quiet presence of someone who'd spent years noticing what others missed. He stood when I approached. Mrs. Bennett. Catherine, he said. He slid a manila folder across the table. Charles hired me January 15th. He suspected Trevor was moving money but didn't have proof. He asked me to track Trevor's activities, financial and personal. I opened the folder. Bank records, photos, reports. The first photo showed Trevor downtown. The second showed him with a brunette woman I didn't recognize, mid-30s. Who is she? Olivia Martinez. She's a nurse at Atrium Health. She and Trevor have been involved for 3 years. My stomach turned. Rebecca doesn't know. No. But there's more. He pulled out another photo, a little boy maybe 8 standing beside Olivia outside a school. Dark hair. Trevor's eyes. That's Ethan, Trevor's son. I stared at the photo. Trevor has a child. Yes. Olivia kept it quiet. Trevor pays her monthly through TDT Holdings, the same account he uses for the stolen money. He promised her he'd leave Rebecca once he had enough, but he never did. Trevor had lied to everyone. Rebecca, Olivia, Charles. Charles knew. He found out in March. That's when he decided to go to the police. He was turning everything over May 18th. But he didn't make it. Vincent's expression darkened. No. I looked at Ethan's photo again. An innocent child caught in Trevor's web. Mrs. Bennett, Vincent said carefully. Did Charles show unusual symptoms before he passed anything off? I met his eyes. Headaches, nosebleeds, fatigue. Vincent pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Warfare and poisoning symptoms. I'm not a doctor, he said quietly, but I've worked enough cases to know when something doesn't add up. If Charles was showing those symptoms and Trevor knew Charles was about to turn him in, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse. My voice was steady. Trevor had lied about everything, including what happened to Charles. Vincent called me the evening of May 19th, his voice calm but urgent. Mrs. Bennett, I've been in touch with someone at Charlotte Mecklenburg PD. Detective Susan Bradley. She wants to meet with us tomorrow. What does she want? To talk about next steps. 2 o'clock at CMPD Trade Street. I agreed without hesitation. The next afternoon I drove downtown. The CMPD building was gray concrete and glass, imposing in the way police stations always are. Vincent met me in the lobby, and together we were escorted to the Financial Crimes Unit on the 3rd floor. Detective Susan Bradley was waiting in a small conference room. She was in her early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp, assessing eyes. She wore a navy blazer, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm. Mrs. Bennett, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult. Detective. She gestured to the chairs. Please sit. I've reviewed everything Mr. Russo provided, and I've gone through the file Charles submitted before he passed. I sat slowly. You were already investigating. We were in preliminary stages, Susan said. Charles contacted us May 10th. He provided documentation of unauthorized transfers through TDT Holdings and scheduled a meeting for May 18th. She paused. He didn't make it. Her words hung in the air. We have strong evidence of financial crimes, Susan continued. Trevor Caldwell moved nearly $5 million through a shell company. That's fraud and theft. But what happened to Charles? She shook her head. Charles showed symptoms consistent with warfare and poisoning. Without autopsy review or direct evidence linking Trevor, we can't prove intent. My chest tightened. So Trevor gets away with it. Not if we can get him to show his hand, Susan said. She leaned forward. This is where I need your help, and you need to understand the risks. I looked at Vincent. He nodded. What do you need? I asked. We need to create pressure, Susan said. If Trevor and Rebecca believe you have evidence they don't know about something connecting them to Charles, they'll panic. Panic makes people careless. You want me to lie to them? I want you to let them think you know more than you do. Visit Rebecca. Mention Charles left something, documents, recordings. Don't be specific. Plant the seed. And then, we watch. We listen. If they reach out to each other, try to destroy evidence, coordinate stories, we'll be there. Guilty people give themselves away. I thought about Rebecca, my daughter. What if she didn't know what Trevor was doing? Susan's expression softened slightly. Then that will become clear. But Mrs. Bennett, Rebecca received over $600,000. That's not ignorance. That's involvement. I swallowed hard. There's another thing, Susan said. If Trevor realizes you're onto him, he may see you as a threat. We'll have surveillance, but there will be moments when you're alone. Trevor has caused harm before. He may try again. Vincent spoke up. I'll stay close. We can wire you with recording equipment. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. What are the chances this works? If they're guilty, Susan said. High. Guilty people run. When they run, they leave tracks. I took a breath. Charles's face flashed in my mind, his smile, the way he used to hold my hand after 42 years. Trevor had taken him from me. I looked up at Susan. When do we start? Tomorrow. We'll set everything up tonight. I nodded. Susan closed her notebook. Mrs. Bennet, I won't lie. This is dangerous. But it's the only chance we have to get justice for Charles. I stood my purse in hand, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. It's dangerous, I said, but it's the only chance we have. The morning of May 23rd, I met Vincent in the parking lot of a shopping center near my house. He handed me a small device no bigger than a button and showed me how to clip it inside my collar. Audio only, he said. Detective Bradley and I will be listening from my car. If anything goes wrong, we're 2 minutes away. I nodded, my throat tight. Remember, Vincent said gently, you don't have to give details. Just let her know Charles left something. Let her imagination do the rest. I drove to Ballantyne just after 2:30. Rebecca's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. 2 stories, white columns, perfectly manicured lawn. Trevor's money had bought them a beautiful prison. I rang the doorbell at 3 o'clock. Rebecca answered, and for a moment I saw my little girl again. But then her eyes met mine and I saw something else, fear. Mom, she said, forcing a smile. I wasn't expecting you. I know, I'm sorry. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house was immaculate. White furniture, spotless floors, fresh flowers on the entryway table. It looked like a showroom. It felt empty. We sat in the living room. Rebecca folded her hands in her lap, her wedding ring catching the light. How are you doing? She asked. I'm managing, I said. I let the silence stretch. Then I took a breath. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. Your father left some things for me. Documents, instructions. Her face went pale. What kind of documents? Financial records, emails, things he wanted me to have in case something happened to him. I watched her carefully. He was very thorough. Rebecca's hands tightened. Mom, I don't understand. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you should know. I kept my voice steady. Your father trusted me to handle things the right way, and I will. She stared at me, her breathing shallow. I stood. I should go. I just wanted you to know. Mom, wait. Take care of yourself, Rebecca. I walked out, my heart pounding, and got into my car. I didn't look back. 3 blocks away, I pulled over and called Vincent. Did you get it? I asked. Every word, Vincent said. And Catherine, she called someone. 17 seconds after you left. The call lasted 43 seconds. My stomach dropped. Who? We're tracing it now, but my guess, Trevor. I closed my eyes. My daughter. My own daughter. Go home, Vincent said. Lock your doors, we'll keep watching. I got home just after 4. The house felt too quiet. I made myself tea, chamomile, something to calm my nerves, and sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. At 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a delivery driver holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. Catherine Bennet. Yes. This is for you. Have a nice evening. I carried the package inside and set it on the counter. My name was written on the tag in Rebecca's handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside was a box of herbal tea, lavender and chamomile blend, and a handwritten note. Mom, I know things have been hard. I thought this might help you sleep. I love you, Rebecca. My throat tightened. For a moment, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe my daughter still cared. I made a cup at 10:30, letting the tea steep while I sat at the kitchen table. It smelled like lavender and honey. I took a sip. It was warm, soothing. I drank the whole cup. By 11, I felt tired, more tired than I should have. My head felt heavy. The room tilted slightly when I stood to rinse the cup. I gripped the edge of the counter. Warfarin, headaches, nosebleeds, fatigue. My hands started to shake. I looked at the empty teacup, at the box on the counter, at Rebecca's note. I thought this might help you sleep. Oh God, I had just consumed the substance. The same thing that took Charles from me. I woke on the morning of May 25th to a headache so severe I couldn't open my eyes without the room spinning around me. My body felt heavy, like someone had drained every ounce of energy from my bones. 2 days since I'd had the tea. I sat up slowly, gripping the edge of the mattress to steady myself. Every small movement felt wrong. When I stood to walk to the bathroom, I had to hold onto the wall to keep from collapsing. That's when I saw it in the mirror. Bruises. Dark purple marks scattered along both my forearms that hadn't been there when I went to bed the night before. I touched one gently. It didn't hurt, but it had no reason to be there. I splashed cold water on my face. It's just stress. You're exhausted. But I knew better. At 8:30, I felt something warm on my upper lip. I touched it. My fingers came away red. A nosebleed. I grabbed tissues and tilted my head back, pressing hard against my nose. But the bleeding didn't stop. 5 minutes passed, then 10, 15, 20. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, tissues soaked through my hands, shaking. I thought back to everything I'd read about warfare and poisoning. Headaches that wouldn't go away. Nosebleeds that wouldn't stop. Unusual bruising appearing out of nowhere. Oh God. At 9 o'clock, I heard the front door open downstairs. Diane's voice called out, "Catherine, you home, honey?" I tried to answer, but my voice came out weak. Bathroom. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Then Diane was standing in the doorway and her face went completely pale. "Catherine, what happened to you?" "I'm okay, just a nosebleed, it stopped." But Diane wasn't listening. She knelt beside me, her hand on my arm, and that's when she saw the bruises covering my skin. "Catherine, these weren't here yesterday morning." "I know they weren't." "I don't know where they came from." Diane pulled out her phone, her hands shaking now. "I'm calling Vincent right now." She dialed. The phone rang twice. "Vincent, it's Diane Robertson. You need to get to Catherine's house immediately. Something is very wrong with her." I could hear Vincent's voice through the speaker, sharp and urgent. "What are her symptoms?" "Bruising all over her arms, a severe nosebleed that lasted over 20 minutes. She's pale and exhausted." There was a pause. Then Vincent's voice came through louder. "Get her to Atrium Health Emergency Room right now. Don't wait. I'll meet you there." Diane helped me to my feet, grabbed my purse, and guided me down the stairs to her car. The emergency room at Atrium Health was bright and overwhelming. Diane explained everything to the intake nurse. They took me back within minutes. The doctor on duty asked questions while a nurse drew blood from my arm. "Have you started any new medications recently?" "No." "Any history of bleeding disorders?" "No." "Have you eaten or drunk anything unusual in the past few days?" I hesitated. The tea flashed in my mind. Rebecca's handwritten note. "I thought this might help you sleep." "Tea," I said quietly. "My daughter sent me herbal tea 2 nights ago." I drank a cup. The doctor looked up. "What kind of tea?" "Lavender and chamomile blend." She made a note. "We're going to check your PT and INR levels. Those measure how well your blood is clotting." By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the doctor returned. Her expression was serious. "Mrs. Bennett, your INR is extremely elevated. Your blood isn't clotting the way it should. Have you been exposed to warfare in—" My chest tightened. "Not that I know of." "The levels suggest significant exposure. This didn't happen naturally." Diane squeezed my hand. The door opened. Vincent stepped inside, followed by Detective Susan Bradley. Vincent's face was grim. "Catherine, we need that tea. Where is it?" I looked at Diane. "It's on my kitchen counter." Diane stood. "I'll go get it now." Susan moved closer. "Mrs. Bennett, do you still have the note Rebecca sent?" "Yes, it's in the box." Susan nodded. "We'll have both tested immediately." Vincent crossed his arms, jaw tight. "Rebecca called Trevor 17 seconds after you left her house. Now you're here with warfarin in your system. That's not coincidence." I closed my eyes. My own daughter had sent me the same thing that took Charles from me, but I was still here. I opened my eyes and looked at Vincent. "Trevor was trying to take me out," I said steadily, "but I'm still breathing." The house felt too quiet. It was the evening of May 25th, and I sat alone in the living room. Diane had gone home. Vincent was monitoring Trevor. The doctors had released me from the hospital that afternoon with instructions to rest and take vitamin K daily to reverse the warfarin, but I couldn't rest. I looked at Charles's chair, the leather recliner where he used to read the newspaper every Sunday morning. His reading glasses were still on the side table. His coffee mug, half empty, sat beside them. I hadn't had the heart to move anything. The man who had poisoned him was out there free, planning to flee the country, and my daughter had helped him. On my kitchen counter sat the tea box Rebecca had sent me, the lavender and chamomile blend, the handwritten note. Mom, I know things have been hard. I hope this helps you rest. Love, Rebecca. I picked up the box and held it in my hands. Had she known what was inside when she sent it? Or had Trevor given it to her sealed? I wanted to believe my daughter had been tricked, but the evidence said otherwise. The 17-second phone call, the warfarin in the tea, the money Trevor had paid her. My mind went back to a memory from 20 years ago. Rebecca, 18 years old, had made me tea when I was sick with the flu. She'd sat beside my bed and read to me until I fell asleep. Had that girl, the one who'd cared for her mother, become someone capable of this? I closed my eyes and prayed. God, give me the strength to see this through. At 9 o'clock on the morning of May 26th, my phone rang. It was Detective Susan Bradley. Catherine, the lab results are back. The tea Rebecca sent you contained a lethal dose of warfarin, enough to cause fatal internal bleeding within 72 hours. If you hadn't gone to the ER when you did, you wouldn't be here. My hands went cold. So Rebecca knew. Yes, Susan said gently. She knew. I sat down. My body ached, not just from the warfarin, but from the weight of what I'd just learned. My daughter had tried to take my life. At 11 o'clock, Vincent called. Catherine, Trevor just purchased a one-way ticket to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departure is May 29th at 2 p.m. If he gets on that plane, we lose him. What do we do? Susan is meeting with the district attorney now to get an arrest warrant. We're going to take him down before he boards. Over the next 2 days, I barely slept. My body was still recovering. The vitamin K injections left bruises on my arms. I had frequent headaches. My energy was gone. But my resolve had never been stronger. On the evening of May 27th, Vincent called again. Catherine, Trevor just withdrew $50,000 in cash from Wells Fargo. Rebecca withdrew $30,000. They're preparing to run. What about the arrest warrant? Judge signed it this morning. We're moving in at 6 a.m. on May 29th, 3 hours before Trevor's flight. At 8 o'clock that night, I drove to CMPD headquarters on Trade Street. Susan, Vincent, and Philip Whitmore were waiting in a conference room. Susan laid out the plan. At 6 a.m., 2 teams will execute simultaneous arrest warrants, one at Trevor's residence in Dilworth, one at Rebecca's home in Ballantyne. We'll bring them both in for questioning. With the financial evidence, the warfarin in the tea, and Rebecca's phone records, we have enough to charge Trevor with first-degree responsibility in Charles's death and poisoning with intent to harm you. Philip turned to me. Catherine, are you ready for this? I thought of Charles. I thought of the 5 months Trevor had poisoned him with arsenic while I watched my husband waste away. I thought of the 2 weeks Rebecca had ground warfarin into his smoothies. I thought of the tea she'd sent to me. Yes, I said, I'm ready. On my way home, I stopped at Greater Faith Baptist Church. Reverend Samuel Brooks met me at the door. Catherine, come in. We sat in the empty sanctuary. I told him everything, the warfarin, the arrest planned for tomorrow, my fear that I might lose my daughter forever. Reverend Brooks took my hands. Catherine, you are doing what is right. Justice and mercy can coexist, but accountability must come first. God will give you the strength to face tomorrow. We prayed together for 20 minutes. When I left, I felt lighter. Tomorrow morning, Trevor Caldwell would be arrested. Tomorrow morning, my daughter would face the consequences of her choices. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. At 7 o'clock on the morning of May 27th, Vincent Russo sat in his car across the street from Trevor Caldwell's office building in uptown Charlotte. He'd been there since 6, drinking cold coffee and watching the entrance. At 7:45, Trevor emerged. He wore a tailored suit and sunglasses. He walked with the confidence of a man who believed he'd gotten away with everything. Vincent followed him to the Wells Fargo branch on Trade Street. Inside the bank, Trevor approached a teller and requested a cash withdrawal. Vincent couldn't hear the conversation, but he watched Trevor's body language, relaxed, almost smug. 10 minutes later, Trevor walked out carrying a leather briefcase. Vincent called me immediately. Catherine, Trevor just withdrew $50,000 in cash. He's moving fast. My stomach turned. What do we do? Susan is with the DA right now. The arrest warrant should be signed by noon. We're going to get him before he boards that plane. At 10:30, Vincent drove to Rebecca's home in Ballantyne. He parked 2 houses down and waited. At 11, Rebecca came out the front door carrying a black trash bag. She walked to the backyard. Vincent moved closer, staying hidden behind a row of hedges. Rebecca knelt beside a metal fire pit. She pulled documents from the bag, bank statements, receipts, handwritten notes, and began feeding them into the flames. The papers curled and blackened. Smoke rose into the morning air. Her hands were shaking. She kept looking over her shoulder as if she expected someone to appear. Vincent took photographs with a telephoto lens. Then he texted Susan, "Rebecca is destroying evidence. Backyard of her residence. Get the warrant expedited." At noon, Susan called me. "Catherine, the judge just signed the arrest warrants for Trevor and Rebecca. Both are charged, Trevor with first-degree responsibility in Charles's death poisoning, with intent to harm you, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Rebecca is charged with voluntary manslaughter and conspiracy." I closed my eyes. "When do you move in?" 6 a.m. tomorrow, 2 teams, simultaneous arrests. Trevor's flight is at 2 p.m., so we'll have him in custody 8 hours before he can leave the country. What if he tries to run tonight? Vincent is watching him. If Trevor makes any move toward the airport early, we'll intercept. I exhaled slowly. "Susan, what if something goes wrong?" Her voice was steady. "Catherine, we've built an airtight case. Financial records, toxicology reports, Rebecca's phone logs showing the 17-second call. The tea with warfarin. Trevor's plane ticket, we have him." At 3 o'clock that afternoon, I sat in my living room and looked at the photographs on the mantel. Charles and I on our wedding day. Charles holding newborn Rebecca. The three of us at Rebecca's college graduation. I picked up the photo from Rebecca's graduation. She was 22, wearing her cap and gown, smiling between her father and me. Charles had his arm around her. He looked so proud. Where had that girl gone? I thought about the woman Vincent had watched this morning, the woman burning evidence in her backyard, the woman who had poisoned her own father. My heart broke all over again. At 7 o'clock that evening, Vincent called with an update. "Catherine, Trevor just met with someone at a restaurant on South Boulevard." I couldn't get close enough to hear the conversation, but I got photos. It was a woman, mid-30s, dark hair. She had a young boy with her, maybe 8 or 9 years old. I frowned. "Who is she?" I ran her license plate. "Her name is Olivia Martinez. She's a nurse at Atrium Health. And Catherine, the boy's name is Ethan Caldwell." My blood went cold. Trevor has a son. Looks that way. I'm guessing Olivia is his mistress. And based on the way they were arguing, I don't think she's getting on that plane to Costa Rica with him. Another betrayal. Another life Trevor had destroyed. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and prayed. "God, give me the strength to face tomorrow. Give me the courage to see this through. Charles deserves justice. And even though my heart is breaking, I know what must be done." At 5:30 on the morning of May 29th, my phone rang. It was Susan. "Catherine, we're moving in 30 minutes. I got dressed and drove to the CMPD headquarters. Susan had told me I could watch the arrests remotely via body camera feeds. At 6 o'clock, I sat in a conference room with Vincent and Philip. 3 monitors showed live feeds from the arrest teams. "Team 1 is at Trevor's residence." Susan's voice came through the speaker. "Team 2 is at Rebecca's." I held my breath. "Execute," Susan said. The doors went down simultaneously. Trevor Caldwell and Rebecca Bennett were in custody. At 5:45 on the morning of May 29th, I arrived at CMPD headquarters. Vincent led me to an observation room on the 3rd floor. Through a one-way mirror, I could see an empty interrogation room, gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs. "You'll see and hear everything from here," Vincent said. "But they won't know you're watching." At exactly 6 o'clock, Detective Susan's voice came through the speaker. "We're moving in." Vincent's phone buzzed with updates. "Team 1 is at Trevor's house. Team 2 is at Rebecca's." I held my breath. "Target secured," a voice crackled through. "Trevor Caldwell is in custody." "Target secured," another voice said. "Rebecca Bennett is in custody." It was done. At 7 o'clock, Trevor Caldwell was brought into the interrogation room. He wore an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. His face was pale, but his expression was calm, almost defiant. He sat down across from Susan and folded his hands on the table. Susan opened a thick folder. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm Detective Susan Bradley, Financial Crimes Unit, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. You've been read your rights. Do you understand them?" "Yes." "Do you want an attorney present?" Trevor leaned back in his chair. "Not yet. I want to hear what you think I did first." Susan didn't react. She pulled out a document. For the past 18 months, you transferred $4.8 million from Bennett and Associates into a shell company called TDT Holdings, LLC, registered under your name. Do you deny this? TDT Holdings is a legitimate consulting firm. Charles approved every transaction. We have bank records. Not a single transaction was authorized by Charles Bennett. Trevor shrugged. Your records are wrong. Susan placed a spreadsheet on the table. Fake invoices, fake vendors, fake contracts. You moved money offshore using false documentation. Trevor glanced at the spreadsheet but didn't touch it. I'd like to see the emails where Catherine Bennett approved these transfers. There are no emails, Susan said evenly, because Charles never approved them. Trevor smiled slightly. Then this is a misunderstanding. Susan leaned forward. Let's talk about Catherine Bennett. On May 23rd, she visited your wife, Rebecca, at her home in Ballantyne. 17 seconds after Catherine left, Rebecca called you. What did you discuss? I don't recall. The next day, Rebecca sent herbal tea to Catherine's home. Catherine drank that tea and was admitted to the emergency room with elevated INR levels, evidence of warfarin poisoning, the same substance that caused Charles Bennett's death. Did you know about the tea? Trevor's expression didn't change. I don't know anything about tea. Your wife sent it. Then ask her. Rebecca makes her own decisions. I'm not responsible for what she does. Susan pulled out another document. On May 11th, you purchased a one-way ticket to San Jose, Costa Rica, departing today at 2 p.m. Why Costa Rica? I was planning a vacation. A one-way ticket? I hadn't decided how long I'd stay. Susan's voice hardened. Mr. Caldwell, you were fleeing the country. You embezzled $4.8 million. You poisoned Charles Bennett over a period of 5 months with arsenic, and then you used Rebecca Bennett to administer warfarin to finish the job. When Catherine got too close to the truth, he tried to eliminate her too. Trevor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Susan stood. Rebecca is in the next room. She's talking to my colleague right now, and she's telling us everything. Trevor's eyes flickered just for a moment. Interview suspended at 9:18 a.m., Susan said. Mr. Caldwell has requested an attorney. I watched through the glass as Trevor was led out of the room. He didn't look back. His face was stone. Vincent turned to me. He's not going to confess. He thinks he can beat this. Can he? No, Vincent said. We don't need his confession. We have the financial records. We have the tea with warfarin. We have Rebecca's testimony. And we have the arsenic evidence from Charles's exhumation. 10 minutes later, Susan came into the observation room. Catherine Trevor Caldwell is a wall. He's not giving us anything, but we don't need him to. Rebecca, on the other hand, is falling apart. My heart sank. Is she talking? Susan nodded. She's ready to tell us everything. I closed my eyes. My daughter was about to confess to helping take her father's life. Do you want to watch? Susan asked gently. I looked at Vincent. He nodded. Yes, I said. I need to see this. Susan led me to another observation room. Through the glass, I saw Rebecca sitting at a table, her head in her hands. A female detective sat across from her. In the next room, Rebecca was starting to talk. If you're still here, leave a comment. Comment one word for what you're feeling right now. I want to know you're still with me. And tell me this: if you were in my place, knowing your own child is about to tell the truth in the next room, would you want to hear it, or would you be afraid of what it might destroy? One quick note before we continue: the next part includes a few dramatized elements for storytelling. Some details may be adjusted, and if this feels too heavy, it's okay to stop here. At 8 o'clock that morning, Vincent touched my shoulder. Catherine, let's move to the other observation room. Rebecca's interview is starting. I followed him down the narrow hallway. Through the one-way glass, I saw my daughter sitting across from Detective Susan Bradley. Rebecca's hands were shaking. Her eyes were red and swollen. Susan's voice came through the speaker. Rebecca, you've been read your rights. Do you understand them? Yes. Do you want an attorney present? Rebecca shook her head. No, I want to tell the truth. Vincent stood beside me. I pressed my palm against the cold glass. Susan opened a folder. In the past 18 months, you received over $620,000 from TDT Holdings, LLC. That's Trevor Caldwell's shell company. Why? Rebecca's face crumpled. I owed money, $950,000. Susan leaned forward. To whom? Online gambling sites. By early 2023, I was drowning. I couldn't tell anyone. When did Trevor find out? January of 2023. He saw my phone. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll help you." He made it sound so easy, but by the time I realized what he was doing, I was trapped. He said if I didn't keep quiet about the embezzlement, he'd tell Dad everything. I'd lose my family, my freedom. I felt my knees buckle. Vincent steadied me. Susan slid a bank statement across the table. Trevor paid you $620,000, but you owed $950,000. Where's the rest? Rebecca wiped her eyes. Trevor said he'd pay the remaining $330,000 once we were in Costa Rica. He said we'd start over. He promised he loved me, but he never intended to take you. Rebecca's voice broke. No. When I found out about Olivia and Ethan in February, I realized he'd been lying, but it was too late. Susan pulled out a photograph, a gold wedding band in an evidence bag. Rebecca, at your father's funeral, his wedding ring was missing. Where is it? Rebecca's sobs grew louder. Trevor took it. Right after Dad died while the body was still at home, he pulled it off Dad's finger. He said a ring that old could be sold for cash without leaving a trace. That's when I realized Trevor had no respect for my father. He only saw dollar signs. I pressed my hand against the glass. Charles had worn that ring for 42 years, and Trevor had stolen it like it meant nothing. Susan's voice hardened. Your father found out about the embezzlement in early May. What happened? Dad confronted Trevor on May 9th. Trevor called me that night. He said, your father is going to the police. If he does, you'll go to prison for life. He said the only way to stop it was to make Dad too sick to think clearly. What did Trevor give you? Warfarin. He told me to grind the pills and put them in Dad's morning smoothies. Susan leaned forward. How did you have access to your father every morning you lived in Ballantyne? Rebecca's voice dropped. Dad had been so tired from the earlier arsenic poisoning. I told him I was worried about his health. I started coming over every morning with nutritious smoothies that Trevor had already prepared with the warfarin inside. Dad trusted me. He drank every one and smiled and thanked me for caring about him. That trust is what haunts me most. On May 15th, what happened? Trevor called. He told me to triple the dose. He said, it has to be done today. I didn't ask why, I just did it. Susan pulled out the tea box. On May 23rd, you sent tea to your mother. It contained warfarin. Did you know? Rebecca collapsed forward. Trevor gave me the box. He said Mom was getting too close. I didn't want to know what was inside, I just sent it. At 11, Rebecca looked up. Is my mom okay? Susan glanced toward the glass. Yes, she's alive. Rebecca sobbed. Thank God. By noon, she had signed a full statement. I stared through the glass at my daughter. I thought about the little girl who used to braid my hair. I thought about Charles, who had loved her unconditionally. Vincent's voice was gentle. Catherine, you don't have to testify against her. I shook my head. Yes, I do. Charles deserves justice. Rebecca needs to face what she's done. I will pray that one day she truly understands the weight of what she has done, but justice cannot wait for her repentance. I turned away from the glass. My daughter had just confessed to causing my husband's death. On the morning of May 30th, I sat in Philip Whitmore's office. Rebecca's signed confession lay on his desk. Catherine. Philip said, if we want to prove Trevor personally poisoned Charles, we need to exhume the body. A full autopsy will tell us everything. Are you prepared? I thought of Charles resting in Evergreen Cemetery. The idea felt wrong, but I knew what he would want. Yes, do it. Philip filed the petition that afternoon. On June 2nd, Judge Franklin Aldridge signed the exhumation order. Trevor's attorney objected, but the judge overruled him. Mrs. Bennett has the right to know how her husband died. Exhumation granted. At 7 o'clock on the morning of June 5th, I stood at Evergreen Cemetery with Diane Robertson. A white tent covered Charles's grave. Workers in protective gear moved quietly. Diane squeezed my hand. You don't have to watch. Yes, I do. Reverend Samuel Brooks stepped beside us. Catherine, would you like to pray? We bowed our heads. Heavenly Father, give Catherine strength today. Charles is with you now. Guide us as we seek truth and justice. Amen. Amen, I whispered. Diane touched my shoulder. Charles is with the Lord. He's not in that grave anymore. He's home. Tears blurred my vision as the workers began. By noon, Charles's casket had been transported to the medical examiner's office. Dr. Kevin Martinez met me that afternoon. Mrs. Bennett, the full autopsy will take 5 to 7 days. I'll call you when we have results. The next 6 days were endless. I couldn't eat or sleep. Vincent called every morning. Susan checked in twice. Diane brought meals I couldn't touch. On June 11th, my phone rang. Mrs. Bennett, this is Dr. Martinez. Can you come to my office right away? An hour later, I sat across from Dr. Martinez. He placed a thick report on the table. Catherine, your husband didn't just die from warfarin in May. He was poisoned long before that. My hands went cold. What do you mean? We found elevated arsenic levels in his hairnails and bone tissue. Charles was poisoned with arsenic from December 2023 through March 2024. 5 months. I stared at him. Arsenic. Yes. Small doses over time causing chronic fatigue, stomach pain, nausea, confusion symptoms, easily mistaken for stress. I remembered Charles's exhaustion, weight loss, the headaches. Dr. Martinez continued. Trevor didn't want Charles to die immediately. He wanted him weakened and incapacitated first. Why? Control. When Charles became weak and confused, Trevor could manipulate company decisions more easily. Charles's judgment was impaired. His memory suffered. Trevor likely forged signatures and authorized transactions Charles would never have approved. I felt sick. So the arsenic was about the company? Yes. But in late March, something changed. Charles likely started to suspect poisoning and mentioned seeing a doctor. Arsenic shows up in hair and nail tests if ordered. So Trevor stopped. Exactly. He couldn't risk detection. But by then, Charles had discovered the embezzlement. When Charles confronted Trevor on May 9th, Trevor realized he couldn't control him anymore. Dr. Martinez pulled out another document. So Trevor recruited Rebecca to administer warfarin, a substance causing internal bleeding that looks like stroke or heart attack, much harder to detect without full autopsy. It was a calculated switch to avoid detection and finish what he'd started. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes gripping the steering wheel. Trevor had tortured my husband for 5 months, month after month, watching him suffer, using his weakness to steal from him, and I hadn't known. I called Susan. I just left Dr. Martinez's office. Trevor poisoned Charles with arsenic for 5 months before the warfarin. He tortured him. Susan's voice was steel. Catherine, this changes everything. We're adding charges: first-degree responsibility with aggravating factors, premeditation, prolonged cruelty. Trevor Caldwell is never getting out of prison. I closed my eyes and thought of Charles. Trevor had tortured Charles slowly. I would make sure he paid for every moment. At 6 o'clock on the morning of June 13th, my phone rang. It was Detective Susan Bradley. Catherine, the district attorney, just issued a formal arrest warrant for Trevor Caldwell. First-degree charges with aggravating factors in Charles's death, premeditation, prolonged suffering, and poisoning of a witness. He'll be arraigned this morning at 10. Do you want to be there? I didn't hesitate. Yes. At 10 o'clock, I sat in the gallery of courtroom 5110 at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. Vincent sat on my left. Diane sat on my right. Philip Whitmore sat 2 rows ahead, ready to observe. Trevor Caldwell was led into the courtroom in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. His face was pale. His eyes darted around the room. When he saw me, he looked away. Judge Margaret Henson entered. We rose. Mr. Caldwell. Judge Henson began. You are charged with first-degree responsibility in the death of Charles Bennett, poisoning with intent to harm Catherine Bennett, embezzlement conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead? Trevor's attorney, a man in an expensive suit, stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Judge Henson reviewed the evidence summary. Her expression hardened. The state has presented evidence of arsenic poisoning over 5 months, warfarin poisoning, financial crimes totaling $4.8 million, and witness tampering. Mr. Caldwell, do you have anything to say? Trevor shook his head. The bail hearing lasted 15 minutes. Trevor's attorney argued for house arrest. Philip stood and addressed the court on my behalf. Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell attempted to flee the country. He purchased a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. He poisoned 2 people, one with fatal consequences. He is a flight risk and a danger to witnesses. Judge Henson didn't hesitate. Bail is denied. Mr. Caldwell will be remanded to custody pending trial. Trial is set for June 26th. The gavel fell. Trevor was led out in handcuffs. He didn't look at me. On June 14th, Susan called. Catherine Rebecca has agreed to testify against Trevor. She's now a cooperating witness. In exchange, the DA is recommending a reduced sentence, 18 years instead of life. I closed my eyes. 18 years. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Will her testimony convict Trevor? Yes, Susan said. She'll testify that Trevor gave her the warfarin and told her how to administer it and sent the poison tea to you. Combined with the arsenic evidence and the financial records, we have an airtight case. Over the next 5 days, I met with Philip and the assistant district attorney 3 times. He prepared me to testify. He walked me through the timeline. He showed me photographs, bank statements, and toxicology reports. Catherine. Philip said gently, "You'll be on the stand for at least 2 hours. Trevor's attorney will try to discredit you. He'll suggest Charles's death was natural. He'll attack your memory. Are you ready?" I looked him in the eye. Yes. On the evening of June 19th, I drove to Greater Faith Baptist Church. Reverend Samuel Brooks met me at the door. "Catherine, come in." We sat together in the empty sanctuary. I told him everything: the arsenic, the warfarin, Rebecca's confession, the trial next week. Reverend Brooks took my hands. "Catherine, you are doing the right thing. Charles deserves justice. Rebecca needs accountability, and Trevor must face the consequences of his actions. God will give you the strength to testify. He will give you the words you need." We prayed together for 20 minutes. When I left the church, I felt lighter. On my way home, I called Diane. "The trial starts Monday," I said. "I'm ready." Diane's voice was steady. "You're the strongest woman I know, Catherine. Charles would be so proud of you." I thought of my husband. I thought of his smile, his laugh, his kindness. I thought of the 5 months Trevor had taken from him. The trial would begin next week. I would not let Trevor get away with this. On the afternoon of August 8th, I sat in the same courtroom where Trevor had been sentenced. This time it was my daughter in the defendant's chair. Rebecca wore a gray prison jumpsuit. Her face was pale. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. When she saw me, tears filled her eyes. I looked away. At 2:30, Judge Margaret Henson addressed Rebecca. "Ms. Bennett, you are charged with voluntary manslaughter in the death of your father, Charles Bennett, and conspiracy to commit harm. How do you plead?" Rebecca stood. Her voice was barely audible. "Guilty, Your Honor." The assistant district attorney stood. "Your Honor, the state recognizes that Ms. Bennett cooperated fully with our investigation. She testified against Trevor Caldwell, providing critical evidence that led to his conviction. In light of her cooperation, the state recommends a sentence of 18 years. 18 years. My daughter would be 56 when she was released. At 3:30, Judge Henson asked if I wanted to speak. I stood and walked to the podium. I looked at Rebecca. She was crying. "Your Honor," I began. "My daughter poisoned my husband. She put warfarin in his smoothies every morning for 2 weeks. She sent poison tea to my home knowing it could take my life. She did these things because she was weak, because she was afraid, and because she allowed Trevor Caldwell to manipulate her." I paused. My voice was steady. "I have not forgiven Rebecca. Not yet. Forgiveness is not something I can give lightly. My husband is dead because of her choices. I almost died because of her choices. Rebecca must be held accountable before the law. She must serve her sentence. She must live with what she has done." I looked directly at Rebecca. "But I am still her mother, and I believe that even in the darkest places there is a chance for redemption. 18 years is a long time. I hope Rebecca uses that time to become the person her father believed she could be." I sat down. At 4 o'clock, Judge Henson pronounced sentence. Rebecca Bennett, you have pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and conspiracy. You will serve 18 years in the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. You are eligible for parole after 12 years. The gavel fell. Rebecca was led away. She looked back at me one last time. On August 12th, I drove to the correctional facility in Raleigh. Diane had offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. I sat across from Rebecca in a small visiting room. A guard stood by the door. Rebecca's eyes were red. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know those words don't mean anything, but I held up my hand. Rebecca, listen to me. I have not forgiven you. I don't know if I ever will. But I believe in something bigger than my anger. I believe that God can redeem any mistake, any sin if we are willing to change." Rebecca wiped her eyes. I leaned forward. "You have 18 years, Rebecca. Use that time. Go to counseling. Get your life together. Face what you've done. Your father loved you. He would want you to find your way back." Rebecca nodded, her voice breaking. "I will, Mom, I promise." I stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. 18 years. Use them to become the daughter I once believed in. As I drove home, I thought about Charles. I thought about the company he had built, the people he had helped, the life we had shared. Trevor would rot in prison. Rebecca would serve her time. But I was still here. I had not forgiven, not yet. Now, I had to turn this pain into something meaningful. In September of 2024, I sat in my living room and looked at Charles's photograph on the mantel. Trevor was in prison. Rebecca was serving her sentence. The trials were over, but the pain remained. I thought about what I had said. I have to turn this pain into something meaningful. It was time. On September 15th, I met with Philip Whitmore, Vincent Russo, and Diane Robertson in Philip's office. "I want to create a foundation," I said, "something that helps families who've lost someone to financial crime or suspicious deaths. I want to give them the resources we never had." Philip nodded. "What would you call it?" "The Charles Bennett Justice Fund." Vincent leaned forward. "I'll help with investigations. Pro bono. This is the right way to honor Charles." Diane squeezed my hand. "I'll help however I can." Philip began drafting paperwork that afternoon. On September 18th, we filed the Articles of Incorporation. The Charles Bennett Justice Fund was officially established. Its mission to provide investigative support, legal resources, and financial assistance to families seeking justice. I used money recovered from Trevor's embezzlement to fund the organization. Charles had built Bennett and Associates with integrity. Now it would help others fight for the truth. Between October and December, we hiked 4 families. A widow in Greensboro whose husband died after a business dispute. Vincent investigated and uncovered evidence of poisoning. The case went to trial. A man in Asheville, his sister was embezzled by her financial advisor. We connected him with a forensic accountant. The advisor was arrested. 2 more cases involved insurance fraud and elder abuse. Both led to arrests. Each time I met with a grieving family, I saw myself 8 months earlier, lost, angry, desperate. And each time we uncovered the truth, I felt my purpose return. On the afternoon of January 10th, 2025, my doorbell rang. A young woman stood on my porch. She was in her late 20s with dark hair pulled back. Her eyes were red. "Mrs. Bennett." "My name is Angela Moore. I found your foundation online. I need help. My brother died 3 months ago. The police say heart attack, but I know it wasn't. His business partner has been acting strange. Money is missing. I think his partner had something to do with it." I stepped aside. "Angela, come in. Tell me everything." We talked for over an hour. Angela's brother Michael had been 32. He'd co-owned a construction company in Durham. 2 weeks before his death, he'd discovered nearly $500,000 missing. He'd confronted his partner, then he collapsed at work. The autopsy said heart attack, but Angela didn't believe it. "Mrs. Bennett, I don't have money for an investigator. I don't know where to start, but I can't let this go. Michael deserves justice." I looked at her and thought of Charles. I thought of the 5 months Trevor had poisoned him while I watched helpless. "Angela, I will help you find the truth." That evening, I drove to Greater Faith Baptist Church. I sat alone in the sanctuary and prayed. "Charles, you taught me about justice. You taught me about integrity. You taught me that doing the right thing matters even when it's hard. I'm going to bring that to people who need it. I'm going to make sure your life meant something." Peace settled over me. When I got home, I called Vincent. "We have a new case." "Tell me," he said. I smiled for the first time in months. Charles's legacy would live on. I would carry it forward, one family, one truth, one case at a time. Life would go on. Justice would prevail. Looking back on this journey, I realize how easily family drama stories can destroy lives when we ignore the warning signs. I'm Catherine Bennett, and if there's one lesson from my story, it's this: trust your instincts. When Charles started showing symptoms, headaches, fatigue, confusion, I told myself it was stress. Don't be like me. Don't wait until it's too late. In Grandma's Stories Across Generations, we talk about resilience and faith. God gave me the strength to seek justice, even when it meant holding my own daughter accountable. But I wish I'd acted sooner. I wish I'd asked harder questions. Betrayal can come from those closest to us, and that's the hardest truth to accept. Family drama stories remind us to protect our loved ones, investigate financial irregularities immediately. Don't dismiss sudden health changes. Document everything. Ask hard questions. Seek help when something feels wrong. These grandma stories aren't just tales of surviving, they're lessons about fighting back and demanding accountability. My advice: stay vigilant, love your family, but verify their actions. If someone you trust suddenly changes behavior or money goes missing, don't ignore it. If you found value in these family drama stories and grandma stories, please share them. Someone out there might need to hear this. Your awareness could save a life. Final note: this content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the lessons and messages are entirely valuable. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content that better fits your needs.